Good evening. Thank you for coming to our first MAPC Speaker Series event featuring award-winning journalist and communication consultant, Randy Shandobil. We are pleased to welcome Randy to the MAPC program tonight to provide insights into his career covering important news stories like the 9/11 terrorist attacks and to provide advice to aspiring communication professionals. During his more than 30 years as a broadcast journalist, Randy was known for his insightful political analyses and for being one of the toughest interviewers on television. His probing interviews often got presidents, presidential candidates, governors, senators, corporate executives, and others to reveal uncomfortable truths. Now Shandobil is using his skills as a reporter to help corporate executives, policymakers, and political leaders get better prepared for journalists and to help campaigns with their advertising. Having conducted more than 10,000 interviews, Shandobil knows the techniques journalists use to prepare for interviews. He knows the questions they are likely to ask and the types of quotes journalists are most likely to use. He also knows how the questions journalists often ask entice office holders and business leaders to stumble down roads they are often best avoiding. Shandobil has covered many of the most noteworthy news stories of our time: the 9/11 terrorist attacks, Hurricane Katrina, the Bush v. Gore United States Supreme Court decision, every presidential election since 1984, President Clinton's impeachment trial, California's recall election, the Unabomber case, and the O.J. Simpson murder trial. In addition to winning 8 Emmy Awards, Shandobil has twice been chosen by a national panel to win the Walter Cronkite Award for excellence in television political journalism for his coverage of presidential campaigns in California government. Other honors include the California Journalism Award for excellence in political reporting 4 times, the Freedom of Information Award from the Society of Professional Journalists, and the Society of Professional Journalists Career Achievement Award. He has moderated several debates, including the gubernatorial debate during California's historic recall election and the 2010 United States Senate debate. Among the people he has interviewed, Barack Obama, George W. Bush, Bill Clinton, John McCain, Nancy Pelosi, Jerry Brown, Rudy Giuliani, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Al Gore, John Edwards, John Kerry, Dianne Feinstein, Barbara Boxer, Jimmy Carter, George H.W. Bush, and many others. Thank you again, Randy, for coming to this event to speak to our group and serving as the inaugural guest of our speaker series.
Well, thank you. Obviously, I'm pretty old. I've been around for a while. This is informal. I probably won't get through all of this stuff. So just ask questions and we'll be casual and we'll go as far as we can. What I currently do is my company, Shandobil Communications. I mainly do media training, working with politicians, preparing them for media interviews, corporate execs, etc. I do some political advertising, crisis communications, and I'm doing a podcast, This Golden State, with Randy Shandobil. Listen to it. My unbiased opinion is it's really good. It's on SoundCloud, iTunes, Stitcher, and San Francisco Magazine runs it as well. I used to be at KTVU, their political editor for several decades. Yes, I started when I was 5. And I do occasional political analysis for KRON currently during this election season. So let's get started. Showing this guy because we're going to talk about how to communicate with journalists this evening. At least that's what I'm told to talk about. So one thing, studies show that the biggest fear, most people's biggest fear, is public speaking. It rates even higher than death. Death is number 3, public speaking is number 1. And if you all know Jerry Seinfeld, I think he joked once that means that the guy in the coffin is in better shape than the guy speaking, doing the eulogy. You know, it's just, anyway. So I want to point out that they're really, I mean, I'm nervous now. I've been doing this for years and years and years and years, and I still get nervous. The point is, in starting, that when you communicate, be it on camera, be it one-to-one, if there's more than one person there and you know you're on the record, people get nervous. It comes with the territory, and it kind of doesn't go away. So if you get nervous, don't beat yourself up. And if you look at this little kid's puzzle of the states, I'll show you that even some well-known people blow it. This was President Obama when he was running for president, first running for president in 2008.
It is just wonderful to be back in Oregon, and over the last 15 months we've traveled to every corner of the United States. I've now been in 57 states. I think one left to go.
He must have been born somewhere else. How could he not know? No, the point is, you know, he made it. He's doing okay. He blew it then. It didn't matter. Here's another one. This one is really, really painful. This woman's name is Jan Brewer, the former governor of Arizona. She was governor already for a year when this debate happened. And what I'm going to show you is, you know how in debates they have your opening statement? You know, you can prepare a month for your opening statement. It's like t-ball, softball. It's easy. So this is her opening statement. She's governor of the state of Arizona, and here's how it goes.
Thank you all for watching us tonight. I have done so much, and I just cannot believe that we have changed everything since I have come your governor in the last 600 days. Arizona has been brought back from its abyss. We have cut the budget.
Whoops. Oh no. Let me go back. Sorry.
Thank you all for watching us tonight. I have done so much, and I just cannot believe that we have changed everything since I have come your governor in the last 600 days. Arizona has been brought back from its abyss. We have cut the budget, we have balanced the budget, and we are moving forward. We have done everything that we could possibly do. We have
Pretty painful, huh?
did what was right for Arizona.
Point being, I mean, that's colossally bad. Terrible, terrible, terrible. She won the election. I mean, I personally don't like the woman. You know, I don't agree with her politics, but the point was the people of Arizona forgave her for this because they liked her positions and thought she was competent, despite the fact that she couldn't speak well in a debate. And then one more. Do you all know who this is? Okay, well, I'll make this quick. Here's a hint. He did the Miss Universe thing. I'll run through this. You all know the story about the Miss Universe? Yeah. Okay.
Good luck to both of you.
Just for those of you who don't, this guy's, you know, like a comedian. He's on a TV show. Okay, well, as you all know by now, Miss Columbia was not the winner. She goes through all this, she cries, people in her home country are joyous, they're celebrating, she waves a flag, they put the crown on her, the sash on her, and I won't show this all because you all know the story, but he read the wrong cue card, and it was so awkward at the end that someone comes up, takes the sash off her, takes the crown off her, and she's trembling, crying, and he's still got a TV show. So, again, yeah, be nervous. Uh-oh. Connections lost. Let's see if I can recover my connection. Okay, I'm going to end it early. because you've all seen it. How to calm your nerves. Again, most people get nervous in front of a camera or in front of groups, but some people even get nervous if they're talking to a newspaper reporter, print reporter, or just a group. So, being nervous is normal. If you get nervous, if you get tight in your throat, I just kind of tell myself, okay, game time. This is what comes with the territory. It's just now an expected reaction. If you're going to do something on camera, or even with a print reporters usually will record stuff so they have it so they can quote you accurately, even if they're not going to use the recording. I advise my clients to break the ice while they're waiting for things to start. Just say, hey, how's your day? If they're coming to, if it's a client and they're coming to his or her office, did you get here okay? Did you find parking okay? Can I get you anything? And I know that sounds like nonsense. It's just small talk, and it is small talk, but it gets your voice working. It gets that away. Once you start talking, it's gone, and you won't squeak the first time you're on camera. And besides that, it's always a good idea to be nice to reporters or people who are interviewing you or you're interviewing. It just helps. Deep breaths if you're really nervous. Into your stomach. If you're thirsty, room temperature water. Don't eat salted peanuts and peanut butter before you go on. The most important thing is be prepared. The best way to relax is to be prepared. If you're prepared, you walk in more confident, you're not worried about forgetting something, and you will see that I am not very well prepared tonight, so I'm not following my own edicts. But again, that's the most important thing, is being prepared. Like the debates coming up Monday, those folks are cramming. Even the moderator is cramming for the debate. You have to be prepared. Body language, more important obviously for well, first of all, before we go on, what are all you folks hoping to be? Public relations, marketing, anyone? What are you hoping to speak up? Just what are you going to do?
So I've worked in marketing communications, and I sort of want to now focus more on communications and public relations. Okay,
so you may find yourself representing some corporate entity or some business publicly.
Yeah, I want to open my consultancy like you.
Oh, okay. Are there lots of folks like that they kind of vaguely want to do that?
Yeah.
I mean, so any of you expect to have to represent a company or person on camera or before reporters? Or at least communicate with? Yes? Okay, so this will apply to you. If it doesn't apply to you, speak up and I'll try to race through.
I actually, I just got here to looking for this program, and I actually focus on the communication in the film industry, pre-production, like writing scripts and how to make a script, the idea of the director for the film, make it into a visual, visualize the director's idea. That's what I focus on. But I also do I have done some business by myself, and I have to learn something about body language when I have to talk to this.
Or you may have to pitch the director's ideas, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, psychologists, for example, are very, I'm sorry, my English is not very good. Psychologists are required for this industry because they know how the mind of a person works. So it's a very good skill to have, how to communicate your idea properly.
Good. Okay, let's, lost my connection again. I think I better stay close to this. In fact, what I will do, is it okay if I sit?
Oh, yeah?
Yeah? Okay. That way I can make sure I'm not losing the connection on this. Open and natural is okay. A lot of people think that, like, if you're on camera, you have to keep your head still. If you're a reporter or an anchor person, yeah, you want to do that. But when they're interviewing you, you want to be natural. Don't try some kind of artifice of being something you're not. If you're normally someone who uses your hands, use your hands. I mean, don't go like this, but if you use your hands a little bit, that's okay. It helps you emote properly. I mean, I find I use my hands a lot. And don't worry about that. A lot of people say don't. I say don't worry about it. As I say here, come on. Don't move your feet. If it's a standing interview or you're doing a talkback or something, if you move your feet, your kind of whole body is moving, and that's different than using your head or using your hands. It makes you kind of look shifty. And what I used to do to kind of remind myself not to move my feet is I'd kind of separate my legs. It looks kind of dorky, but they're kind of locked in like a tripod. And so if I'm moving, I'm aware of it. I'm more aware of it. Whereas if I'm like this, I'm just kind of, make sense? If you do a seated interview, especially on camera, lean forward, either straight or slightly forward. Anyone have any ideas why? There's a couple reasons. It makes you look more interested and engaged. I've seen some politicians, some well-known politicians who I won't name, who were doing very, very well, but early in their career were kind of, you know, like when they didn't want to be interviewed about a topic, kind of like this. Yeah. I mean, it looks arrogant, indifferent, but there's another reason, especially if you're not slim. Camera angles in are, you know, kind of, for interviews, they're usually fairly wide angle, you know, in close quarters. Wide angle tends to exaggerate what's close. So if you're leaning back and you've got a slightly protruding stomach, that's what's going to, you know, that's going to be exaggerated. It just doesn't make you look good. So, but the main reason is what you said. It makes you look engaged. But there's a physical reason as well. Phone interviews, if you ever do a phone interview, when I'm doing a phone interview, when people are calling me for an interview, I find I'm more animated and my voice is stronger if I'm standing and even walking. When I'm doing a phone interview, I can kind of pace and think. And sitting down, I get a little bit constricted somehow. Even if you're not on camera, try smiling. If you smile, there's something about smiling, it comes through in your voice somehow. I mean, try it. When you smile, your voice sounds more friendly. And all that counts. Okay, I am going to read you a couple quotes from two famous speeches right now, okay? 7 years ago, our fathers brought forth upon this continent a new nation conceived in liberty and dedicated. I'm stopping right there. I'm interrupting. Okay, next speech. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content. Stop there. Any idea why I'm interrupting so rudely 2 of the most eloquent speeches in the English language so quickly? Any idea why I would be doing that? Aside from the fact that I'm a jerk?
To see if they're memorable?
Because in the media world today, that's how long the average soundbite is. That's how long the average quote in a newspaper is.
About 6 to 7 seconds.
I'm going to show you here. Look at this chart here of the shrinking soundbite. Back in 1968, the average TV soundbite was 43 seconds. In 92, it was down to 20 seconds, and even that was pretty long. In 2000, it was 15. 8 seconds. Now, that's not saying that all sound bites are 8 seconds. That's saying that's the average. Some will be 15 or 20, and some will be 3. And this doesn't count like the cable networks. They're different because they're on 24 hours a day. So they just have to fill the air. They'll just run stuff forever, even if it's boring. They're almost like C-SPAN, okay? But most network broadcasts, most local broadcasts, and if you think about it, even print, this translates to print too. If you read a newspaper, you don't see many quotes longer than a sentence or two, the equivalent of about 8 seconds. So this, simultaneously, it helps you to know this going in, but it also makes your job of communicating tougher because you want to focus on getting something. Your main goal in communicating, be it in person, on camera, in print, is you don't want your quotes to be taken out of context. And I'm going to show you a bit, maybe even this next slide. Well, yeah, this one. This is Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech, and it's absurd that I'm only taking a few paragraphs here because the whole speech, if you ever get a chance, you know, most people have only seen the last couple of minutes of the speech. The whole speech is incredible. I don't know how long it lasts, but the whole thing is incredible. I've only taken a few paragraphs here, but the point is, imagine, it happened in 1965, so there wasn't live TV trucks at the time, but imagine now, and most broadcast is, you know, kind of live. Imagine there was a reporter and they had a satellite truck next to it, and they had to run back after that event broke with the first soundbite, with the best soundbite that they could choose. Well, the thing went on for like, 20 minutes or a half hour. They might choose this one. It's a fine paragraph. But the paragraph we all know now is this one at the bottom. And my point is, if you're a journalist in today's world, especially with not only let me tell you quickly why I got out of the business. I retired from being a broadcast journalist very, very young, and I quit because I saw the future and it was getting bad, and it continues to get worse in terms of being in the business. And that is, when I started, I could work all day for one show on one story. And it was the 10 o'clock news. Then it was the 10 and the noon. Then it was the 10 and the 6. Then it was the 10 and the 5 and the 6. Then it was the 10 and the 5 and the 6 and the 7. And print people are having the same thing, and they're having to stop all the time to not only do their main story for the Chronicle, the New York Times, the Washington Post, whatever, they're also having to engage in social media, which is mainly promotional, but their editors are demanding that they do it. Consequently, me personally, I was working harder and harder and harder and feeling less and less proud of my work. So I just thought, you know what, I'm getting out of it. And that's why I left, and a lot of other people are leaving for the same reason. But the point is, more and more you are finding people, quote unquote, quoted out of context, not because a reporter has bad intent, but because they don't have time to do their jobs as journalists. They just have to grab the first thing that makes some sense. They're not thinking journalistically anymore. And that's bad for journalism, that's bad for consumers of journalism, that's bad for people, but it's just reality now with, the rapid news cycle. Okay, so what do you do when a reporter calls? You represent some company, you represent a politician, you represent yourself. Any ideas? What's the first thing you do?
Well, in my last job, I was the person that handled media, so I guess the first thing I did was find the appropriate spokesperson to represent the query, and didn't say anything until I actually did my work on it.
Well, that last thing you said is the key. The most important thing to do, the first thing you always do, is stall. What are you always doing? Always doing when someone calls you? I guarantee it, you're doing this. First of all, you can't lie about what you're doing, but what are you always doing when a reporter calls, when your mother calls, when your boyfriend calls, when your girlfriend calls? What are you always doing? Always.
Think about what they want.
What's that?
To think about what they want.
Well, that's what you want to do, but the answer is, I get a call, hey, I'm in the middle of something. Can I call you right back? I'm always in the middle of something. I could be working. I could be playing Angry Birds on my phone. I could be doing anything, but I'm always in the middle of something. I want to buy myself at least 5-10 minutes, ideally a half an hour or an hour, to think about what they want to ask. So that's the next thing, find out the topic. I'm in the middle of something. What do you need information on? I'll get right back to you. They say, oh, blah, 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 blah. You know, they won't tell you the actual questions, but they'll tell you the topic. Your next thing is you find out what their deadline is, and always meet the deadline. If the reporter says, I need to hear from you by noon, get back to that reporter by 11:30 or 11:45. Don't right up to the deadline. But if you say you're in the middle of something, to buy yourself some time to think, or to buy yourself some time to help the person you're reaching out, who will be the actual spokesperson, you want to give them time to think, meet the deadline, okay? I'm in the middle of something. It's convenient.
It's never a lie.
It's never a lie. Never, ever lie to the media. It'll get you. It will get you. Just ask Hillary Clinton's campaign. She's not sick. Oh, she has pneumonia. When all she had to do was say she had pneumonia. Not to mention all the lies. Donald Trump lies so often it doesn't catch up with him because they can't keep up with all the lies. Prepare your quotes. Think of what you're going to say. Again, keeping in mind that 8-second thing. Now, that doesn't mean you have to pare down your words to 8 seconds. Because again, a good soundbite, they might let go 15, 20 seconds. Or they might cut you down to 2 or 3 seconds. But you want to keep your message short. If you go long, it's more likely that the person talking to you will choose the part they want to choose. And they don't, again, they don't have evil in mind, but they don't necessarily have your best interest in mind. They have their own best interest in mind and their deadline in mind. So take that away from them. Keep it short ahead of time. Call back, make sure you meet the deadline. Okay. Try to think like a reporter. And again, this only applies if it's a job interview or a magazine that's not a reporter. If it's something else, try to think like whoever it is calling you before you answer the questions. But since I'm a journalist and a former journalist and I mainly prepare people to meet with journalists, that's how I'm going to talk. You try to think like a reporter. If you think like a reporter, it'll help you answer the questions in a way a reporter wants. If you can make the reporter's job easy, it's more likely you will be quoted the way you want. If you make the reporter's job difficult, they may not have time to process it or craft it. They may leave you out of the story altogether, not out of malice, but simply because they're under such a tight deadline, they may not have time to work it simple. So, one thing that always helps you, at least helps me, is I'm thinking, if I were this reporter or this magazine, what would the headline be about the topic? Let's say, for example, a reporter calls, God forbid, about a student rape or faculty cuts. What would the headline be? 2 students are raped, near a USF campus, one or the other. What would the headline be?
2 students raped at USF.
Yeah, or the headline would be if there was an issue of security. I mean, did the school let down, whatever. But if you could think of the headline, then you know what the likely questions are that you are going to be asked. One other reason that you want to think of the headline. I've represented some clients who are very, very happy that they get quoted, but they're quoted at the end of a story. You don't want to be quoted at the end of a story. You want to be quoted at the top of a story. Most people don't read full stories anymore. They read the first few paragraphs, and if they're really riveted, they'll read the whole story. But a lot of people just kind of scan the first few paragraphs. Okay, I know what I need to know about that. On to the next story, right? Okay? You want to be quoted near the top. If you're quoted near the end, it may be accurate. It may be a good quote. You may have made your case very well. The problem is, maybe 50, 60% of the readers of that story didn't get to it. Make sense? So if you're thinking about what the headline is, you could kind of think in a way that maybe this will make it more likely that I will be near the top of the story. Anticipate questions. The 5 W's. You all know what the 5 W's are? Who, what, where, when, and why. All the questions are important. But I find when I was a reporter, this is just me, but I think a lot of reporters think the same way. It was very easy for me to really quickly say who something happened to, or who committed some crime, or who said something, what something was, when it was, and where it was. The thing that I wanted people to talk about was the whys and the hows and what this means next. So generally, you want to think of the headline, but you also kind of want to think the most important thing, the way you could help most reporters the most, is to come up with the why. Why did something happen? Or some colorful detail. Again, if you read most stories, the journalist is covering the basic facts. The interview part is about why, what it means, how it will affect people. Okay? So those are the things you want to focus on when you're preparing to be interviewed. Questions? No?
So this is all great, but often what I found through my experience is that journalists often already know what the story is. So they're coming to you with a quote. So it's sometimes, what would you do if, say, you wanted to, say you work for an organization that wasn't that popular, and you wanted to, say, get your voice out? What I find challenging is journalists will interview you, they'll pretend to be interested in the whys, but then they'll just quote the bit that actually worked that'll then fit very nicely into their story. So how do you influence that if you're a spokesperson?
Well, I would hope that your assessment of most reporters is wrong, but there's probably a degree of truth to it. To some extent, you can't really compensate for that except to make the part that you want them to talk about, the part that you want them to quote, so damn interesting that they can't possibly ignore it. And that's up to you to prepare a good quote. I mean, yes, when I would go out and do a story, I would know most of the story ahead of time. Before I go cover a story, I have to decide, is this newsworthy? Is this something people are going to be interested in? So before I'm calling and interviewing people, I'm doing at least a little bit of homework to find out the basics of it. And generally, when a reporter is going out, they're thinking to themselves, okay, I don't need them to tell me what time this happened, or how many people were hurt, or what the program does, you know. I need them to explain why this would make a difference, or, you know, why it's bad news for people, or what's going to happen next. So to that extent, you're right. Most reporters are kind of assuming that they don't need to hear you talk about the basic facts. But the other part, you know, if you're running into a reporter who has got such blinders on that they're only focused on what they want, well then, the best advice I can give you is to just make the part that you want them to focus on really, really clever, really, really colorful, and, you know, answer their questions. But, you know, one thing that people really should focus on, they may still ignore you. You can't force their hands. Journalists are journalists. Don't try to tell them what to do, because they won't listen. They'll just resent it. But you know what's really important? You're right with that question, but what's really important? They may listen. They may still ignore it, but that's your best bet. Okay? I said to kind of anticipate the questions, and then you also want to anticipate, what do you really want to say? A lot of people dread interviews, being interviewed by the media, but if you think about it, really, it's an opportunity. It's free publicity if you handle it well. So if they call you about some problem at your company, well, obviously you're going to have to answer questions about that problem. But, you know, one, if you're representing the company, you'll want to be truthful, but put the best light on it. But you'll also want to somehow work in something good that you want to say. I mean, you want to think of a way to get what about the politician you work with, yourself, your company, your organization, your nonprofit, whatever. Think about, how can I get this in? I mean, if it's totally not connected, you're not going to. But if it's connected to the topic, how can you get that in? And I won't have time in great detail to tell you how to do that, but we'll have time at least a little bit how to do that later if we have time. Convert your answers to quotes. And by saying convert your answers to quotes, you know what you want to say. This is where you're thinking, okay, I have to pare it down to 8, 10, 15 seconds. How can I do it? And I'm going to get into, hopefully we have time, some rhetorical devices that make it more likely that that's the quote that they will use. Okay? And by the way, if you want, I could send you a file, a PDF of these things, so you don't have to take detailed notes. I mean, it won't have the words on there, but at least have the slides, and maybe it'll trigger thoughts in your memory about these things. Okay, whenever you meet a reporter, treat that reporter like it's a first date. Pretend it's a first date. You're really happy to see this person, even if you don't want to see them at all, even if you dread the person. Again, there's no reason to build up hostility with journalists, with magazine reporters, with someone who's interviewing with someone else. I used to tell some of my clients, and again, this is true, most journalists still working today are so rushed. I used to kind of storm in for an interview with burrito breath and salsa stains on my tie. You know, I'm a slob. Still, pretend I'm a first date. You know, pretend you're happy to see me. That's the goal, because you want to relax. You want to make it like you want people to be happy to see you. It's the same way. So even if you're fearful, even if you dread it, try and kind of psych yourself into, okay, hey, how's it going? Pretend the reporter works for the New York Times, which I think most people would consider, if not the best, one of the best newspapers in the country, okay? And I say that because today, even if it's some blogger or some social guy or social media guy just doing tweet, one, it could get picked up by the New York Times. Two, people are ascending so rapidly these days, they may be working for the New York Times in a year or two. My former intern, when I left KTVU, which was only like 5 years ago, is already the lead reporter for Politico. And he was some young kid who was kind of learning from me, and I don't really know that much, so they go fast. So if it doesn't help you in that particular instance, it'll help you down the road when that reporter, when that young college student is working for a major paper or a major TV station or a major magazine, they will know you and think of you fondly. So treat every reporter, even someone who calls from the local rag, like you respect them, okay? Okay, why am I showing the Rodin thinker? Any ideas? It's a kind of a trap question. The point is to think on your seat, not on your feet. How often have you heard, someone's being grilled by Congress, by the media, and you think, man, that guy really thinks on his feet. He's prepared for anything. And Bill Clinton was, kind of like that. He really thinks on his feet. He's quick. He's ready for anything. He doesn't seem unprepared for anything. Well, he's not thinking on his feet. He's thinking on his seat ahead of time. Again, this gets back to that very first thing, the way to relax. The way to relax is to be prepared, to think on your seat. I used to, I think you mentioned, I moderated a couple debates, and people complimented me for quote-unquote thinking on my feet. Well, I didn't think on my feet. I practiced how I would interrupt someone when they were going too long so that I wouldn't seem rude. I didn't let them go too long and interrupt them and say, you're out of time or you're not answering the question. I kind of practiced ways because I knew that I would have to do it over and over and over again, because that's how politicians are. They're evasive and they only want to say what they want to say and they don't want to answer questions. So I knew I would have to interrupt them. So I practiced ways at home, bounced them off my wife. Like I had to come up with 10 ways to say you're out of time. Or 15 ways to say, well, you're not answering the question. With all due respect, can you? I practiced and came up with different things, and people thought, wow, you were really quick. You were thinking on your feet. Well, I'd done it all before, so that when they were kind of going into some evasive maneuver, I knew how to handle it. So the point is, think on your seat. The same way when you're about to be interviewed, you know, the more prepared you are, the more relaxed you are, the more likely you'll succeed. Okay, what do you do if you're asked a question that you don't want to answer? Or a question that is going to reflect negatively on your company, your nonprofit, your organization, yourself, whatever. A lot of people like me, consultants, would say, just segue to something else and don't answer the question. I don't advise that. And maybe I'm giving bad advice, but this is the advice I give. I say A, B, C. Answer the question. Bridge to something, to what you want to say, and then communicate what you want to say. I really think that most people now are smart enough to see through the evasive political BS, evasive maneuvers. You're going to see a lot of it Monday night if you watch the debate. You know, them trying to dance around, and hopefully the moderator is good and strong enough. In fact, my next podcast is going to be about moderators and how they prepare. Hopefully that person will be good enough and strong enough to keep them tight in actually answering the question. But usually, rather than streaming off on something altogether, answer the question, even if it's only 5 seconds. Well, you know, you're right, that is a problem. Bridge. But, I mean, the bridge could be really simple. And also what's important to keep in mind. Again, the C part, the communicate part, it can't be totally off question, but as long as it's related and you briefly answer the question, you could kind of bridge, segue really briefly to what it is you want to say. And if you are well prepared and you have a really colorful analogy or some other rhetorical device, and it's really an important point that maybe the journalist hasn't thought of in the C part, well, then maybe they won't use your answer and they'll go straight to the part you want. Can't guarantee it. Maybe the odds are only 50-50, but it improves the odds, and at the same time, it doesn't make you look like a political jackass.
I find that really challenging because I've tried the ABC technique, and what journalists do is they'll just take the A, where you've got the spokesperson specifically agreeing to the issue, and then that's...
Well, they may be doing that because your C part is not closely enough related to the A part. I mean, if it's totally off the basis of the story, then I can go with it. But if it's within the realm of the story, and you have done a really good job of preparing a sensational C part, you know how Bill Clinton used to do it? I mean, aside from, I'm not going to get into it. Well, this is kind of funny, so this will delay things a bit. But when presidential candidates come through town, I'm assuming it's still the same. I don't think they've changed, and they don't come to town much in San Francisco anymore because we're not relevant, because everyone knows how we're going to vote. But when they used to come to San Francisco, they would agree to, you know, Bush, Obama, Hillary Clinton, when she was running against Obama, they would agree to meet with all the network reporters one-on-one, but for only 5 minutes. And you would have, each of us would set up in a corner or adjoining hotel rooms, and they'd work it really fast. And they do that because they know in 5 minutes, rather than a press conference, everyone's going to start with the same question, whichever the news of the day is, and they're going to get more airtime because it's one-on-one and it flatters the vanity of the reporter, and they're less likely to be challenged with in-depth follow-up questions that they get in a press conference. So it works to their advantage. Anyway, there was one reporter, I won't name him, but he used to sit like this, and he was so interested in having the politicians kind of act like they knew him that he wrote his name on the bottom of his shoes. Okay? And the point being that Bill Clinton would know, he was so clever that he would only use most politicians try to kind of butter up someone and say your name over and over and over again. And I get nauseated by it, and I would never use it because I'd hate it when they use my name because it seems so phony. And Anyway, he would know that most reporters would use the part where he said the reporter's name. So he would save the C part. You know, you could be talking about whatever, but when he said, you know, well, Randy, communicate, take this sound bite, and often those reporters would bite, okay? So sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Okay, best bites first. This gets back to my Martin Luther King example. Again, in today's world, reporters, as well-intentioned as they are, even magazine reporters, they don't have the time they used to have to kind of go through all the material and decide what is the most cogent bite, what is the best bite to use, what is the best part of the interview to use. I mean, some still have that time, but many don't. They are in such a rush that they literally scan through the tape or the digital video card or the audio recording and grab the first thing that makes sense. So you increase your odds of getting your C part, the part you want in there, by having it near the very top. It doesn't guarantee it, it increases the odds. Make sense? Oh, went too far. Okay, knife fight in a telephone booth. There was a political consultant I used to interview a lot around this time. You know, what's going to happen next in the presidential campaign? He said, well, when it gets close, it's like a knife fight in a telephone booth. Telephone booths don't exist anymore, but most people still understand the analogy. That would be ugly and nasty and, you know, no rules anymore. Everything goes. So my point being, it's a colorful analogy, and analogies make it what you're saying more memorable, especially when you're having to deal with something that's difficult and arcane, difficult for most people to understand. Even cliches help people understand it and rivet it in. And since we're about to have a debate Monday night, I thought I'd go back to the 2012 debate. And I don't know if any of you paid attention back then, but in 2012, Mitt Romney, the Republican nominee, was repeatedly bashing Obama for not being as militarily prepared as Republicans would have liked him to be. He would say things like, we've cut down on the amount of battleships we have. So Obama came up with an answer that compared Romney's philosophy to an old children's game and came up with a colorful analogy that really kind of turned the whole debate. So
I think Governor Romney maybe hasn't spent enough time looking at how our military works. You mentioned the Navy, for example, and that we have fewer ships than we did in 1916. Well, Governor, we also have fewer horses and bayonets because the nature of our military has changed. We have these things called aircraft carriers where planes land on them. We have these ships that go underwater, nuclear submarines. And so the question is not a game of battleship where we're counting ships. It's what are our capabilities?
you get it? He uses an analogy, most anyone born in the United States remembers how I played that game. I get it. It made Romney look foolish. It's not about how many weapons you have, it's what type of weapons you have and the intelligence you have behind it. And again, he didn't directly insult them, but he's using analogies and people remembered it. And I am pretty sure that was the part of that debate that was run over and over again 4 years ago. Anyone recognize this car? Probably don't. You're way too young. Ford Pinto! Known back in the 1970s for exploding and burning when a car would just touch it from behind. It's one of the cars that built up Ralph Nader, kind of one of the most famous consumer activists, his name because he fought against the dangers of the Ford Pinto. Anyway, I show you this card. Are we already out of time?
I think.
Holy moly.
Yeah. Sorry.
Okay, well,
The problem for both of them
talking about Trump and
is really
Clinton.
unlikable, dishonest mispronounce. The good news for Republicans is that she is unliked and
one of the recent speeches.
And the bad news is that he is also. I mean, they are offering the American people 272 Pintos in different colors, and the American people are like, don't they both blow up? I mean, this is not.
You get the idea. They're both dogs. Okay, I was going to show you. Stop. I was going to show you a few more good analogies and also talk about, but we don't have time. I'll just really quickly wrap up. Another common rhetorical device that works well in sound bites, the power of threes. I am here. I will be here tomorrow. I'll be here next week. Movie titles, Sex, Lies, and Videotape.
I came, I saw, I conquered.
Real estate, location. And if you think about it, when you say something once, it's an incident. If something happens twice, it's a coincidence. If something happens 3 times, it's a pattern, okay? So if you say something in a pattern, people kind of pick up the pattern, but there's no reason for it to go 4 or 5 times because people have already got the pattern. So again, you're wanting to keep things tight. Power of 3. If you listen to a lot of famous speeches, I was going to show you a couple, you'll see the power of 3 is very common. The rule of 3, excuse me. I came, I conquered, So anyway, since we're out of time, I am ending abruptly and awkwardly. But I'll answer any questions, if you have them. Well, okay.
I invite you, Randy, you're going to pick up in my class. If you want to come in and sit in, even though it's a small room, we'll accommodate. All right?
I'm going to talk a little bit more about this. There won't be very much overlap. Mainly what I'm going to talk about in David's class is how to build relationships with the media, how to get them to trust you, and et cetera. So I hope you found some of this somewhat interesting. Anyway.